Hello and welcome to another show on Ahead of the Curve. I'm your host, Geoffrey Platt. I'd like to welcome Ted Pallas, who's on the show with me today. Ted, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man. Thank you so much for joining. Really
having
glad to have you here with me today.
Awesome.
So before we get started, I also wanted to actually give a very warm welcome to a new member to our team. I'm very pleased to announce we actually have a marketing manager now. Her name is Christy Milliken, and I'd just like to welcome her to the show. She's from a company called Social Curator here in Florida, and I'm very honored and glad to have her here with me. So welcome, Christy. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing for us. So Ted, can you give us a little background about where you're from and kind of how you got started in this crazy mess of an industry?
Yeah, so I am a New York-based designer, New Jersey-based designer, but like New York for the bulk of my career. And what that usually means, what it means for me is that I started in theater. I actually started at the opera. So at Lincoln Center, at a venue that used to be called New York State Theater, which is where you used to be able to find city opera and city ballet. And I was really I'm not sure if it's honored or blessed. It's probably a really great combination of both to work under Abe Jacob for about 4 years as just his assistant, like learning everything he invented about sound design, right? So that was a really powerful way to kind of start my career as like a really young person. I think I was 21 when I made that move, just like, oh, I'm at Lincoln Center. I should go over there to the college, and see if they have a job for me, because my dad's on me about you're gonna live in a box, and I don't want to
live. You gotta make something of yourself. So, you need a career.
Yeah, well, there's the Lincoln Center. This is okay. Let's go knock on the door. This is what we're in the city for. And then I did it, and it worked. But what was great, what I wasn't expecting when I opened this door, was that I would get this view into the old school production industry that was kind of, I don't want to say on the way out, but being digitized. Right. So I got to enter the industry at this moment of great change where all of these amazing production professionals were kind of establishing the way that analog workflows would cascade into digital workflows, right? Which is really talking about turning a lot of labor into a lot of clicks. Mm-hmm. So that's basically me getting my start as a designer, is helping sound design teams on Broadway and at the opera and off Broadway, and 5 times off Broadway, just all over the city, digitized workflows that up until really recently were super analog. And that just kind of, I think, set my mindset for approaching design on the whole, is remembering that, oh, hi guys, it's Patrick and Dan, is remembering that
we love you too, Dan, and Patrick.
Analog is where all of this starts, and what analog means is not warm or good or anything, but somebody actually grabbed some copper and put some connectors on it and then made some circuits and soldered them together, and now we plug them up, right? So that is, I guess, a really long-winded to say that I got my start as a designer digitizing all of what's around us, right? And have really done everything I can to continue that into my work as a video designer now, right? And I'm about to reveal something. I've never touched a camera, really, professionally for money.
No.
I've done motion graphics, tons of motion graphics. I've done media servers, tons of media servers. I've punched cameras all the time. I've shaded cameras, been there. I've done robo cameras, but I'm not touching that camera. I'm sitting at a table and that camera is way over there. What I've never actually done for a job is stood behind the camera and given it some settings and then boop up until we're in XR, right? But, and this is where this all ties in, is because I had already, by the time XR popped up, been approaching design practices from a place of how do we digitize a practice that we can study, because it's been really worked out by some people who are utter geniuses, and they've done a great job of documenting it, and maybe we can even ask them some questions. That is a really valid approach to a computer-based design practice, especially in 2020, when so many of our tools are simulation and experience based, rather than something that we have to code and really understand the computer science of what's going on. We can design storm systems with storm handles, like turbulence of cloud, stuff like that you don't necessarily get 20 years ago when computer graphics are a much more specialized kind of a trade.
Very, very cool. So just kind of digging into, where you came from and how you got started, what have been like some of the most important steps that you've taken to get to where you are now and what you're doing?
So I think the most important steps I took were actually working my way up through org charts, right? And kind of like making a point.
Isn't that the same thing for us all?
I mean, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know, because I was really conscious of like always, where I was on a team, and even as we're shifting industries, right, of like trying to shift into the same position, right? So for example, like working through Broadway as an assistant for a while, right? And like, working at the opera as an assistant and then an associate, and then like picking up responsibilities. Like, are you asking about specific gigs or like things I did, or maybe I'm not answering the question right?
No, I'm just kind of wondering, like, what were the kind of the big stepping stones for you that made you move, for example, let's just say from audio design into video
Got
design?
you. So okay, so
what were the parts that really attracted you to go there?
I got you now. I got you
in the
now.
hole.
The show was Fela on Broadway, and I was working with Rob Kaplowitz and Jessica Paz on it for a very long time. Also Jack. What's up, everybody? And that was a show where I started as a sound design professional, and I ended it as somebody who was like, all right, I'm going to do video. And here's what happened on that one is Sa Ngaja, who played Fela, and Danny Soto, who was the dance captain, wanted to do an Afrobeat party, and they wanted to have like visuals that were impacted by music. And I was mucking about with Ableton, and one day in the theater, they just saw me doing it. And they were like, yo, you should come like hang with us and do this thing. And when you're studying sound design and you come out as a sound designer, there's a thing that happens in the theater, which is people never want to hear your opinion of how something looks. This is what it is, right? Like, you're a soundy person, right? So I was really feeling that, especially when I was younger.
I totally get you, because that's exactly where I started. When I was in theater school, at first I was like, I'm going to be an audio engineer. I'm going to be a sound designer. And I worked my way through that, and then eventually moved to lights, because you can control lighting and color. And
it's fun to think about what things look like with your eyes.
Lighting is a little more flexible, I would say. You can get away with, missing things, little things you can kind of get away with. Whereas in audio, it's exact. People are going to hear it right away. Right?
Definitely. And there's like so much focus that you have to give. So I think part of the training that people were doing with me when, as I mentioned, org charts, when I was young and I was an assistant, was like, don't think about the lights, dude. Like, you're not
think about the sound.
You're here to think about the microphone pile. Like, is that paperwork done? Like, that kind of a vibe, right? But Sa and Danny and this art director, Fuse Green, who was their resident DJ, like, God bless all three of these three men, like, because they were the first people who asked me my opinion on how something looked. It's like, ooh, like that felt good. That was fun. I want to do this more, because I can actually talk about what I'm seeing on the screen with these other people. I don't have to like onboard them to some goofy sound design language like warm and cold and toasty and all that kind of, like, I don't even know what warm means half the time. I could be honest now, because I've been a sound designer for a long time. I've never known what warm really meant. And then after that, that's where the work started shifted. So pretty soon after that, I think this website might still be up, and I will, first person to email me this link, I'll Venmo you a tiny prize. If you could find the Planet Baja and the Dry Eye Crew website, that's the first thing I ever like produced and art directed.
What's it called?
Planet Baja and the Dry Eye Crew. So these guys are like massive rappers in Sierra Leone, and they're called Dry Eye because they're from a really sad part of the world. So like your eye don't cry when you like hold it open, like really intense, heavy stuff. They came to Brooklyn and we're working with OK Player. So Sa and Danny kind of, like, I say that they and Fuse all rescued me from theater. if these guys didn't do this, I would probably still be out there and honestly still be a little bit miserable. But like right at the right point in my career, before I was a little bit too far down to make it easy to maybe shift out of it, they just started kicking my butt on art and helping me meet some people who would kick my butt even harder and harder. So if you could find the Planet Baja and the Dryad Crew website and you get in one of the links there, you can actually still see like what it looked like to hire savages to do work at our very first job, literally job number 1, age 23. Like here's all of it. Yeah.
Sometimes we all need a little kick in the butt to kind of get things going, right? And to kind of to guide us in a little different directions.
They were so picky. They were like, no, you're good. You're better than what's on the screen there every once in a while. Like they were like hard, you know, but that's what design really is, right? It's about working with clients, like, and it's hard. Like there's sometimes, especially working with, you know, juniors, I feel like there's this expectation that everything that we do is really fun. And like we click on the screen and it's like this Minority Report of like cosine and all this cool stuff, and we swoof, and then we are in there and we're dialing in the look, but it's not really like that. It's work. It's a lot more like bricklaying or something. You're just click by click, brick by brick. Like you just got to get up it. So working with those guys was really great because
one digital brick at a time.
Yeah, exactly. They really saw it like that. It was like we're building a thing here. We're building a brand for this party. We're building a look for this room, right? Like we're really architecting all of this. And I think coming from the theater, we like to think of design as this like collaborative moment, right?
Yeah,
we're all
definitely.
Like,
I mean,
it's not. You can't collaborate on your work. You got to do your work. You collaborate on review.
You can collaborate on the ideas.
Yeah, totally. But we have to work also. And I think that like theater educations have a way of like masking that from the person being trained.
No.
Like God, you know, these dudes really like course corrected me, you know, and I'm really thankful every day. Actually, I think about those jobs every single day because they really set the tone and my expectation in a way that I don't think anything else could have for what the next 12 years were going to be like.
I can't tell you how much the theater scene and background impacted everything that I've done. The education that I got out of working in the theater and going to school and studying theater was absolutely tremendous to get me to, you know, where I am and what I'm doing now today. It was just the ideas and the methods of thinking and, you know, brainstorming those ideas and coming up with those thoughts. It really does kind of mold things and push things forward. So Tracy's asking,
it's a really good question.
Do you find more people are interested in behind the scenes, or is it better to hide in the hard bricklaying?
It depends on the client. And so for Savages too, our client is never the big C, which is how we refer to like the client at the end of the chain. Like if you're doing a job with HP, you know, we're not doing the job with HP. Somebody else has the job with HP. And then we're probably working for a third somebody who's doing a specialized thing, right? So we kind of play that by ear and person by person. I find generally it depends on where they're coming from. It will establish my comfort. It's not about how much they're interested, but it's about how comfortable I am showing how we make the sausage, right? And sometimes with real time and XR, this has been really tricky for us this year because like we have to be educating everybody on what's happening, right? But we're also like learning how to do all this stuff
at the same time.
Yeah. So it's like column A, column B. I think that people are generally wanting to be really interested in the bricklaying, and this year especially we've been working with you know, Pavel Pajak in Poland over at Percepto Labs, Spider, you might know him as, and then Adrian Onyega and Nick over at Lucid. What all these people have in common is that they're really good at listening to me describe sausage. And I'm not sure how many people here went to public school in New York and if you had to read that book about the sausage, but that's kind of the metaphor that I keep on flogging here. No, we don't want to overshare secret sauce, but we do want to share how long.
But you want to share how it tastes.
Yeah, and like before they sell it to their client, and like I want to let them know like the second and third coolest ingredients also. You know, stuff like that, right? Like all of that makes sense. And I called out those three dudes right there because they all have asked me more than I've been willing to share. And I'm kind of seeing that be a trend now, right? Is people are in a way that they weren't last year. And maybe this is like a pre-COVID, post-COVID new normal thing, in a way that people didn't care what my experience was last year. They really care what our experience is this year. And I think we're really experiencing more people wanting to do a more holistic team situation than they have in the past. Traditionally, people would like call me up and fling me some frames, and I would fling them back a notch block, and that'd be that. But like, this is a little bit more this year baked into each other, and I'm honestly loving it. It's great.
I think so too. I've been talking, you know, even internally inside of the company I'm working for now, about, you know, a lot more synergies in between companies and a lot more synergies in between individuals, and, you know, helping better develop tools and help better develop workflows. And, you know, basically, it always comes up as problem solving, but it really is like trying to solve those really complicated problems by bringing in people that encounter those problems all the time, right?
Yeah.
And or people that have better expertise than you might have to be able to help you kind of get through those stepping stones.
Yes.
And
there's somebody in the chat who is a really great example of how better expertise has played itself out in my life here. It's Jeremy Wentworth, who's somebody who nobody in here, I think, is really going to know. Yeah, what's up, Jeremy? So Jeremy Wentworth, I don't know if you guys are aware of a product called BCV Rack. It does modular synthesis stuff. It's kind of dorky. That's a very specific, doesn't matter. What's important is that Jeremy Wentworth and I made
it's very specific. It doesn't really matter.
It's very tweaky. Here, I'm gonna type a link into our chat. You guys can share it. But Jeremy helped me make a clock, and what a clock does is a clock sends like time signals for entertainment, and something I've wanted since I was literally 20. Like I'm a DJ. Sometimes I'm not like out there looking for gigs, but I'll have a mix at a buddy's house, right? So something I've always wanted is a turntable pitch control that I could throw at like a lighting rig or like a VJ loop speed or something like that, because I always need to go sometimes just a little bit faster to get in sync, or like a little bit slower to fall back into sync, and then I can go back to zero pitch. So I met Jeremy through this BCV Rack community and just asked him if he'd want to make this clock. And now you actually can go. There's a clock that exists that we made, and it's free. It will OSC turntable pitch fader style at Ableton controller. And now I've got what I've always wanted, which is this like magical DJ style clock for all entertainment things. And like, you know, community and bricklaying and all of these, I think it's like there's other places where people are actively looking to see what that is, and these people are like colleagues or colleagues from different spaces. So it's like what I was just talking about with being excited that on the client side, it feels like it's more trending towards people wanting to experience sausage. It's also all the sausage makers are getting to know each other. So there's going to be like some really lit sausage on the grill.
I love the metaphor with sausage, as long as there's no blood sausage.
No. I said the Greek. We're going to do, what's the orange? The orange sausage. It's on the tip of my tongue.
I think we need to do the worsts, you know, the brats and some German sausage and
Lucanico. We're gonna make Lucanicos.
Lucanicos.
Rowena. What's up, Rowena? So I know Rowena McKay.
So I did have a question about pasta, because Ted and I had this conversation, you know, like a little while ago about content and stuff being up on the show, and we started to refer to metaphors about pasta. And it's kind of the same thing, you know, like it's all the same pasta, but it's all about kind of the different types of sauce you put on the pasta. But absolutely. I think we've covered that now with sausage.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Well, no, but the sausage is a component of the pasta, right? Because like the pasta is more on the like the client side is where I think the pasta comes from. Like most clients are kind of the same. Like they're coming to us, they're looking for graphics, you know, and that's kind of what makes them pasta, right? Is that the sauce is what goes on it. But yeah, maybe we did cover it with sausage.
I mean, just an FYI, I haven't really had any lunch yet, so I'm starving. So this
we just opened an Italian restaurant.
I'm really hungry right now.
In our building, and I can smell bolognese. Like It's so Jersey here. It's gotten almost stereotypical.
Oh, that's awesome. So, in working inside of design, there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now. We've talked about it kind of week after week about virtual production and extended reality. And I know that you guys have been working in that space, and I've seen some of the stuff that you've been working on, and it's just been absolutely tremendous. And I saw that you've also been working with on it with a tool called Grasshopper.
Yes.
And kind of digging into the more architectural side. So
yes.
I thought that it would be really interesting to kind of talk about that, because that's like, for me, it's always been interesting. I've always loved architecture. I wanted to be, at one point, I actually applied to McGill University in Montreal to go to the schooling, and I submitted my portfolio, and unfortunately I didn't get accepted to the program. It's a really hard one to get accepted to, but I kind of gave up too soon. But of course I was kind of young and stupid still, and just said, like, they don't want me, so I'm not even going to bother to try and reapply, which was really dumb. But I find it's really interesting because more times than not, we always seem to find ourselves crisscrossing. And I'm sure that even some of the viewers can kind of pipe up about this, about kind of the scenery and the scenic design kind of element behind it. But also, a lot of it composes or is composed of architecture. I'm starting to have some notice or knowledge of architecture, because of course we're building, models in 3D spaces. Some of them we're grabbing from, other libraries or third-party areas that we can gain those models from. But in some other cases, we're actually building them ourselves. So I'd love to kind of get your input a little bit.
I'm going to grab a prop.
Yeah. Go grab a prop.
Sorry, I'm just looking for. I don't want to pop up the screen, but yeah.
We love props. So for you guys that are watching the show too, I'd love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds as well. If you guys have been working on any set design, or if you guys have been working on building anything from scratch, if you are building stuff from scratch, it'd be cool to hear what you're building. Just kind of, general idea of what you guys are working on as well, so we get a better kind of understanding and it can help guide the direction. Also, if you guys ever have any questions during the show, we keep it super, super interactive. So feel free to comment any questions that you may have. We're more than happy to kind of answer them as we roll through this conversation. This conversation isn't about just me and Ted. It's also about you as well. So, okay, cool. Let's see this thing.
So we're talking about pasta. This is a cement piece that we made with a studio out here called Booth. That's Joe Davies and Bernard Scaglione. And they're a fabrication shop. They do steel and they do cement. And this hole is like a good serving size for pasta. So you just put this over your pot and it goes right through. But what we learned in making this whole experience is that polygons break machining. Like, they're not happy. Machines want to draw curves. And there's a whole school of engineering that us art people know nothing about, where people are studying like teeth on gears and efficient ways to not break drills. Like a whole school, a whole science of just that kind of vibe, right? So that world wants a beautiful curve. It wants to be ahead of the beautiful curve. Whereas
I like what you did there.
Whereas with Houdini or something like that, which is where this land came out, you could imagine, now that I said it, if you're familiar with Houdini, it's kind of got a little bit of a Dinian feel to it, right? It makes a lot of little polygons, and we broke probably 6 cutter heads trying to work out a good way to cut this shape out of a foam so we could pour cement in there and make this goofy pasta holder mountain thing, right? But what that
so is that literally a pasta holder? You're not
it's like a pasta, like there's like a steel rack that if it wasn't COVID, I was gonna push them to make a steel rack, and you put it over your thing and chunk, like,
drop your pasta in the hole.
It's a little bit silly, but like our cat likes to use it as a pillow, so it's kind of like, a multi-use design tool. Like,
love it.
Pasta, cat, land. No, really, what I wanted to do with it was like a little moss graffiti, but personal projects do what they do, because instead we decided to learn how to work with curves, right? And so as soon as you go, like, I don't know how many VFX people know this, but as soon as you go from polygons to like, all right, I'm gonna like architect a house, like, you're not doing polygons anymore. You will never see a polygon again. You might see a polygon at the very end for a specialized render, but you're not going to have any control over its shape, which is such a mind-blowing thing for a polygon-based world, which is what film and real-time effects are. So I was kind of down the rabbit hole, and then the quarantine happened, and there was nothing to do. So I just was kind of stuck
No
in
money
my rabbit hole
anymore.
there.
Quarantine
Yeah,
happens.
no, and Rhino. Anybody who's interested in this, Rhino has an incredibly generous demo where for 90 days you can like have this full unfettered access to Rhino and Grasshopper. And in quarantine time, I think people are actually able to make pretty effective use of opportunities like that. So yeah, I decided to learn a fourth place to do like all of the procedural geometry stuff, and it's actually panned out to be a really interesting place because like communities are really important, I think, to personal software use for a certain class of professional user. Like you don't
Yeah.
use this stuff by yourself, right? You have to go to the community to get support because your thing is due tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, some of the software platforms are so, there's so much going on, and they're so in depth that you need to have people to reach out to help.
Exactly. And even just be aware of like new trends that the software can do, or like all sorts of benefits as a professional user to joining the community. And the community around Grasshopper is I think right now this year, like we've always been a very internationally focused studio. Like last year and the year before, about half of our billing came from overseas. My partner Alex traditionally was working more in fashion, having incredibly close relationships with factories in China and India. What's cool about the Grasshopper community is it's like architects, and architecture is a truly global discipline. Like I don't think there's really any borders in the worlds of architecture firms. Like an American firm will build in China in 2022 a giant art skyscraper, no matter what the politics are. Like that's just kind of what it is. And what I love about Grasshopper is that it seems like a community that's like really open about reaching like across borders and across experiences, and like helping people to learn how to do this really tricky, complicated math with curves. Just like heck it, why not, right? Like the more people can do this, the better. Like maybe we'll put you on a gig. And then I started looking at like actual jobs that people were posting looking for like Grasshopper specialists. And what's nutty here, this is the craziest thing. I'm not going to go do this, but you got to imagine I was tempted, is there were several jobs like looking for people that were going to go get a timber PhD. You had to be willing to get a timber design PhD, and they'll pay you to get a timber design PhD and then make crazy timber port structures. So it's just like a community that's really figured out how to activate like procedural art into a really profitable place, and is now able to offer some really intense experiences for digital artists. So yeah, like for no other reason, I think we're trying to do more and more work in kind of a Grasshopper Houdini mindset. Yeah.
It's really cool. I think that's really important too, to try and kind of find your niche and to specialize as much as you possibly can in something, that has a need and has demand. So I think that's absolutely amazing that you got in there. I find that, like kind of going back to that complication of tools and community, I love that whole idea. And, there's a lot of those inside of our community. We find, tools like Touch Designer that have come a very, very long way and have done a tremendous job. And, giving really access to being able to do really complicated things without having to write code, or being able to write code and inject it directly into the platform.
Which just lets people work together. And that's the most important thing, right? Because like going back to theater, and we were talking about org chart, what I wasn't able to say is that like you don't climb an org chart, people pull you up it, right? So having mindfulness about where you are and what the next step is really is about training yourself, kind of on the job training, and getting better at the new responsibilities and learning how to get better for the ones that are going to come, right? And I think that Touch Designer is an incredible example of a piece of software that really lets people at different levels in different parts of the discipline work together in a very like cohesive and coherent manner, where literally somebody can type code into the same project file as me, who cannot type anything. Like, so it's a great tool, and I think kind of singular for that. And maybe even a little bit trend setting in what I'm seeing now with like Unreal Engine and Notch, and how comfortable people who aren't traditionally, like who would traditionally be pretty code averse, I think I'm seeing just dive right into these tools. And I think that shout out to Greg. If Touch Designer was not out there first for 20 years doing it and really like consistently hitting home the message, like, nope, this is a valid way to work. Just dive in and do it. Like, we might not be here in 2020 in quarantine brave enough as a community to open the Unreal Engine.
I think there's a lot to be said definitely about consistency. And speaking of consistency, I just wanted to kind of go back to some of the things that people are working on. You know, Patrick was mentioning that he's worked with you quite a bit and been working on XR and some XR projects.
Yep.
You know, Christy, of course, has jumped in and started helping us out with some of the stuff and marketing behind the scenes with Ahead of the Curve. Mm-hmm. Tracy's trying to work out some ideas for virtualizing, you know, film festival and sponsor integrations and stuff like that.
Nice.
I think Rowena is busy making sausages. I'm not too sure, but
Rowena
you are making sausages. Theater. That's awesome. We all definitely need to be making sausages every single day, right? So kind of getting in, I guess, a little bit more into the, let's talk about like markets just a little bit too, because you've kind of worked in all kinds of different things. You've done, you know, you've got digital art, and you've been doing a lot of digital art background. Mm-hmm. You've worked inside of music, and you've worked with synthesizers and, you know, a lot of different types of electronic music devices. I love them personally. I've got a few of them stacked in my office that I come out and tinker with every now and then, and mm-hmm. you know, try and make things work together and link things together. But it would be, you know, like, what are some of the most interesting areas and kind of the most experimental areas that you've gone into? I'm imagining, you know, a lot of the influences might come from the music and, you know, playing around with things inside of the digital art areas and then transitioning those over to a more professional workflow. You know, kind of like where have been some of the areas that have really kind of pushed you and influenced you and
pushed me? Wow, that's such a giant question. So I'm gonna talk
it's a juicy
DJ. I'm gonna talk about like, I guess, like DJ equipment, right? DJ equipment is, I think, was for most of my 20s, that was the environment, like a DJ booth where I would get to just kind of flex some stuff and like try things and not have somebody breathing down my neck. Like, it's gotta be exactly like this. We were also doing a lot of experiential at the same time. And like, the thing about Savages is like, we've been blessed to be working for a very long time. And there's actually like, this is a tricky question for me because there's not so many opportunities to be experimental when you're billing specifically. Usually you're getting requested like not to experiment with this time that is being paid for, right? So the space that was really embracing of us was kind of two-part, like two different sides of me as a creative. One is nightclubs as a visual creative, and then the other one is like the New York improvised music scene as a musician, which I was a part of, you know, up into my late 20s. So like playing with other people, playing music with other people, usually on a bass, sometimes on a drum kit, like really taught me how to listen experimentally, right? Which I think is actually like the most important part of my experimentation, because like a lot of what I'm doing in visuals with this technology is not, it's not new ground, like it's math, you know, it's a sine wave, right? So like the experimentation comes in how we apply these very call me out ahead of the curve. Yeah, but it's like a very.
I was gonna say, Tracy, I think with some of the guests that we've had on the show, yeah, we could definitely throw something out together.
I don't know, like now that we're in XR, right? Like it feels like everything is very experimental, and where I'm falling back to, it feels like I'm working with Rowena McKay on a multimedia piece in like the Brick in Brooklyn, right? And our budget is $5,000. Only what we're actually doing is on a $250,000 LED cube, right? But the energy and the experimentation comes not in like a technical place, but in like a how we jazz the text place, right? So I think that the most experimental project I ever did was actually with Rowena McKay. It was called Times 365, and we had 2 projector carts. It was like 2010 or 2009 or something. So we had 2 projector carts, and I had like my MacBook and like this Dell Inspiron that I got running Linux to like pump some JPEGs because the MacBook would blow up if it had to do 2 outputs. So like we actually were spinning carts around all over the space. And then like the New York Times came. Like who saw that coming? But it was great because that framed experimentation as this thing that people are gonna look at, right? And I think that being in New York, which is such a dense city, as a young person, it was really easy for me to think of experimentation as something that happened in private among heads, right? Like people who were in the room because they want to see the experimentation. But I had to remember, and like that review kind of helped me remember, I am a commercial artist. I am not making work for the heads. The heads enjoy my work, I hope, but I'm really trying to create new heads, right? So I guess talking about experimentation.
You're a Hydra.
Yeah. Well, yeah, chopping off the hydras, right? Like
Well, hopefully making new ones.
But yeah, like it's I guess really the experimentation is like it's like social experimentation, conversation experimentation. Like how far can I get you comfortable thinking from the first thing that we talked about, and how fast so we can start working. Like that's where I'm experimenting more than like, I don't know, Grasshopper feels like I'm painting, and I've never really felt like my art is an experiment because I don't have like an expected result. Like I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I wouldn't want to presume on like actual experiments where they're doing. I'm just making some stuff until I say I'm done, right? So like yeah, to me that the place where I'm a lot more rigorous, I guess, yeah, is in kind of those just paying attention to what's inputting to the design from like a more social standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that it's like time is hard to find as well when you've got all kinds of things going on. When you got life going on, who knows where you are life-wise, and the resources that you have available. For me, it's time. It's always been time, right? I find that when I was younger, I had a lot of time to be able to commit that towards experimenting and kind of finding new ways of doing things. But as I've been getting older and working with a bunch of different companies and things like that, you start to have to juggle things, right? For me, I've got a daughter, and I have to start to find that life work balance, and then also find some time to also learn new things. And I always find that that's definitely a huge challenge when you're striving so hard to make money and get those dollars into a bank account. Where do you find the time to also have a bit of fun and experiment and do that without screwing up the rest of it? So it's always like that juggling act, right?
It is one of those things, right, where it's also like, why are you experimenting, right? And I think something I could have done is
why are you experimenting? You should not
said that. Well, no, not like why like that, but like what's motivating this little sprint, right? So instead of experiments, we call them sprints. And I might have been able to instead talk about sprints. And the cool thing about a sprint is that we're going to have.
For those of you who do not know what a sprint is, it's basically a section of time dedicated towards software development, usually in a 2-week period.
Yeah, so we do like design sprints when we have a couple weeks without client work, and we're just gonna like achieve a deliverable at the end of it. And those are really fun experimentation time. But I guess like when I was younger and I was like learning all the tools, like I kind of moved away from an experimentation mindset because I wasn't making deliverables at the end of it. Like I look back, I should have released like easily 70 techno records. What was I doing? Why did I not? Because I was experimenting, right? And I didn't think of it as a deliverable. And then like shift the mindset. Now it's not experimentation time when I'm over here, but it's like making a deliverable, right? Like what is it? Making that, it kind of shifts the mindset. And just like you're talking about integrating it into your life, like why are you experimenting? I think all time, especially if you own your business, right? Like if you want to have a personal life, all time has to have value, and you have to put value on your like personal time also, and it has to be more valuable than like the work time. And my partner is probably listening to me going, you don't practice what you preach here, dude. And like that's something I'm really trying to work on this year, right? Is moving all of my click time away from this kind of mindset of, I just kind of lost track of the best way to say it, but basically it's just about experimentation has been boiled down to us to be more related to like the deliverable at the end of it than the path that we're traversing. And that was a really important flip. And I think one that was also really good for Savages over the last couple of years, like really did a lot to help us mature as a studio and like the way that we worked too, because all of our time was like practice. Like we're always in a scrimmage, you know,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's a really valuable way to approach time as a team. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really important. I love the whole concept and idea of kind of sprinting and sprint times for breaking things up inside of making sure that you have dedicated time to explore more, you know, and experiment. As Dan Moelle said right there, you know, experimentation and work for hire equals more future work. And Raul hitting it on the head as well, you know, saying that it's how you create that secret sauce and how you come up with those ingredients, right? And I think that's what I love specifically about this particular time, even though it's a really hard time for a lot of people. It's created a lot of time for experimentation. And, you know, a lot of these different workflows are being hashed out. And as we've been talking about, I hate bringing it up all the time, but, you know, it's just the thing that's happening is with the virtual production and extended reality, especially within the live entertainment industry, and actually all other industries for that matter. I mean, you know, extended reality and augmented reality are really pushing into all kinds of different areas within entertainment. I think that live entertainment's kind of been the forerunners or the front runners of building those workflows and those things, because there was kind of a necessity and a need that kind of evolved and came out pretty quickly. But it's starting to really push into these other markets and these other places, which is really, really interesting kind of to explore more. But those extended reality workflows are an area that would not have, I don't think would have been as evolved as they are right now if we didn't actually have COVID. I think they would have gotten there, but I don't think they would have gotten there as quickly as they have, or have blown up as quickly as they have.
I think, yeah, the quickly, that's the most important part there, right? Because like I think that vanguard class of like XR people would have been doing that regardless, just because I think all of us,
no, absolutely. I mean, as I said before, you know, you've got specialists and people are specializing in different areas. So that was definitely an area
something
that people were focusing on already.
I would like to see a little bit more of, I guess, is like people being willing to really like ask each other questions about their own work, right? Rather than like being willing to talk to somebody about that person's work, actually asking a question about your work, right? Because that's something that happens a lot in like video games, and specifically in the notch community and in the touch designer community, that I really haven't seen the more production oriented Unreal community doing, right? And what makes me nervous there is that like if we tiptoe around the quality of our own work, what's going to happen is somebody else is going to be like, yeah, all those guys kind of suck. Like look over here where things are great, and we're going to see all of it slip. So while all of these workflows are advancing, I think that COVID is also, it's probably harder to ask people to rate your work if you don't see them all the time, you know? And like if you're not in your office or your shop where you're seeing these people all the time, but you're learning how to do this. I'm reading Dan's question. Finding spaces to share. So the Facebook, which is kind of what I'm getting at here, right? Which is like we post our work on the Facebook or on Instagram, and it just exists, and people are respectful of it because that's a public space. And honestly, that's not always the most helpful thing. Like sometimes I don't want people criticizing my stuff from afar. I would rather that I'm able to like reach out to somebody and ask them their opinion. And I can do that because I've developed that community, but I don't really see the work progressing outside of like the big firms that are doing it for TV. Like it looks the same as it did when people started. And at this point, it's been 8 months and we should see some particle engines.
I was just going to say, it's interesting that you bring that up, because if you kind of look at one of the common denominators, the art scene has always been more open to sharing things and sharing things that they create. You know, that's why I think that tools like Touch Designer and Notch have done a great job in building these huge communities. So you've got a lot of digital artists and a lot of people that are using those tools to create their media, right? And I find that community is always a lot more open to sharing ideas and talking about work that they've been doing, and you know, trying to brainstorm more ideas to make it evolve and make it even better. That's what I love about cruising some of those channels inside of Facebook and inside of, the social media channels, is like just seeing how much talent is out there, how much inspiration, how much support is out there. It's absolutely incredible.
Tons of it. Anybody who's curious should check out the Notch user group on Facebook, because like that is what your ideal community of like interested in each other people looks like. People are helping each other get better, faster frames, and like not worrying about like, oh, I'm gonna lose business to this guy because I showed him how to do a thing. Like, no, it's really been incredible, and it's something that I think that like XR, we're seeing a lot of stagehands or like designers who wouldn't traditionally be computer artists, right? Are like, well, I guess my job's deleted, so I'm gonna learn the Unreal Engine. Like, cool, but there's like a whole computer arts discipline that kind of comes with being a computer artist, and it's showing people your work, because it's ridiculous to think that all of us individually are going to like come up with the McCandless method equivalent of lighting that's efficient. Like, no, Stanley McCandless came up with it and wrote it down and put it in a book, and then everybody read it. And like, there needs to be some kind of like community driven, I think, XR equivalent where we're really sharing our techniques. And, to that end, we do that on Patreon, and like people who work with us or reach out to us for questions, we'll try and like respond with PDFs whenever we can, to be honest. Like, here's a slightly more holistic thing. Just because there really is so much education that we all have to make up if we're going to do XR. Like, it's a computer science discipline. Right. Yep. So I'm a little bit concerned. Like, I guess that's why I just felt comfortable spending so much time droning about this, is I'm really concerned that we're all like, not all of us, we aren't, but I'm seeing a lot of people go on the Epic Marketplace and they're buying some assets and then they're putting them in the frame and going, look, it's great. It's XR. And like, that's cool, but that's work that can be taken away from us, and somebody else can do it because somebody else can buy that on the marketplace too. So like, instead we could have a post-COVID XR community that could like learn how to make stuff from scratch.
I guess it's a bit of a tricky subject when you really boil it down too, because like the one thing that I always have to remind myself of is, what are people's lives like on the other side of the fence? Mm-hmm. Like the stuff that you don't see, the stuff that's not exposed, the situations that they're in. We all have a way of being able to hide, the worst parts of our lives, or at least guard it to some degree. Some people are much more open about it than others. But, when I see stuff coming up on the marketplace sometimes and sharing different pieces of media, there, I'm not going to say that there aren't people that take advantage of it. There are people that make a living of it. And then there are people that just need to kind of get out there and find ways of creating income. And the only income source that they have.
We do buy things off the marketplace, especially props. If it's a prop, man, I hate making props. I hate modeling props. But like, it's more from like a macro level. Like, if you buy something, you still should understand everything about it.
Yeah, it's like learning how the car is built.
I was about to say, my grandpa and the car, and like, cars today, you don't know what's in it. Like, that's, I think, actually really relevant to this conversation, because we're going to be, asked, like, we represent the entertainment community. Everybody doing XR right now is doing XR on behalf of the entertainment community. And to look at it any other way is goofy. And to not assume that all of those video game people are really excited to go do some cool entertainment stuff is also goofy. So like, we're getting the first shot because we're the closest to the shows. But I think if we're not able to keep up with the technical needs of what's going on, we're going to vacate work that would traditionally go to an arts person. And like, it's important to me that art students not live in boxes. Like, this is one of the few ways that an art degree can actually really be activated, into a profession that one could be really proud of and like rely on, is through design. So like, now that the tools are getting harder and more rigorous, I really want to challenge the community around all of us to like start being more open about what the experience of doing the work is like, because there's people who can already do this and they're so good at it. Like,
it's so true.
Yeah.
And just
don't be goofy.
Goofy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Ted, I wanted to thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, man. So how would the viewers be able to get in touch with you? What's the best kind of method?
Email ted@savages. It's a little bit tricky. savag.es. Yep, just like that.
I think that's actually quite brilliant, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Having the company name Savages and then having the .es extension, that was really, really smart.
Every now and then I'm a little bit like, this is a pain in the butt.
I think it'll pay off over time.
Overall, I couldn't be happier. It was really fun telling the band Savages just straight up no. So yeah, we've got Savages. You can also hit me on Insta @Ted@Savages if you want to like ask me a question about math. Our studio has an Instagram also @Savages_studio. Dan Moali. Sorry, just reading Dan's comment before we hop off. Those are addicted to the medium/genre need venues to satisfy our thirst. But these are the venues, right? Is social media these days. So
well, yeah, here we are right now, right? Streaming to Facebook and to YouTube. So it's kind of a prime example.
Yep. I'll see everybody at LDI 2023.
And Infocom 2023 and ISE 2023 and all the rest of them.
Yep.
Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully it's going to be better than that. So as well, I understand that you've got a Patreon page as well.
Yes. So on our Patreon, we are doing intermediate to advanced math training and some real-time graphics training. Something I found is that learning how to do math was like super important. And before I could do math really goodly, I don't know how to say that, really goodly, it was really hard. And now that I've learned a little bit of math, just like the tiniest bit of like, if you want to do real-time graphics and you're watching SOHCAHTOA, Pythagorean theorem, unit circle, those three things. If you know those three things, you can do so much graphics. But on the Patreon, we go a little bit beyond that. And yeah, it should be cool. If you're looking to train and you popped up here, just send me a message. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ted, thank you so much for being on the show. Next week, I have a good friend, Roy Anthony, who's going to be on the show. He is a creative development and VP over at Ventus, which should be really interesting. Roy and I worked back at Christie Digital, and Roy is a tremendous artist at heart as well. Also was a member of, or is a very active member of SIGGRAPH, and was the chairhead of SIGGRAPH just a few short years ago. So that conversation is coming to us next week. That's going to be really, really cool. And as I say every single week, thanks for viewing this week, everyone. And please stay ahead of the curve. Thanks, Ted.
Bye, everybody.